Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
It is really good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Today we are doing something, well, a little bit different for this deep dive.
Right.
Usually we are deep in the weeds of real-world case studies, you know, analyzing the 2008 financial crisis or the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Or the logistics of global supply chains.
Exactly. But today we are turning our lens onto a piece of fiction. We are going to perform a structural autopsy on the novel Morning Star by Pierce Brown.
And right off the bat, I think we need to set some ground rules for you listening.
Yeah, please do.
This is not a literary review. We are not here to talk about prose style or, rank the characters.
Or decide if the ending was satisfying in a narrative sense.
Right. And this isn't advocacy. We aren't here to shout slogans or paint the rebellion as perfect, flawless heroes. We are looking at this purely as a data set.
Which is crucial because this is not prescriptive. We aren't taking sides on the politics of the novel. We are impartial observers here to just convey the ideas in the source material.
Precisely. The core objective today is to analyze the novel as a simulation of systemic collapse.
A structural case study.
Yes. Pierce Brown has built the society that functions like a high-pressure cooker. We want to understand the mechanics of how that cooker explodes.
And the immense, almost impossible difficulty of trying to build a new kitchen while the house is actively on fire.
It really is a masterclass in institutional fracture.
So before we get into the explosion, we have to understand the machine. In the world of Morningstar, the primary system we're looking at is the society.
And the society is a perfectly rigid hierarchy. It is a color-coded pyramid.
But unlike historical caste systems on Earth, which, were based on religion or tradition or economics,
this one is engineered into the biology of the population itself.
that is the terrifying part of the design. It is not just a uniform you wear. It is your DNA.
Right. At the top, you have the golds. These are the rulers. They are genetically enhanced to be larger, faster, stronger, and just vastly more intelligent than any baseline human.
They are biologically bred for dominance.
Exactly. And at the bottom, you have the reds. The manual laborers adapted for harsh conditions and kept intentionally small and frail.
And then in between, you have a spectrum of utility. Blues for navigation and computation, coppers for bureaucracy, silvers for finance, obsidians for war.
It is the ultimate expression of a place for everyone and everyone in their place.
But by the time we get to Morningstar, which is the third book in the trilogy, the state of play has shifted dramatically.
Right. To understand the collapse in this phase, we have to briefly track the evolution of the failure.
For prior books.
Yeah. In the first phase, Red Rising, we saw the exposure of the design. We learned about the noble lie, the story the golds tell the reds to keep them working.
And we saw the craning mechanisms of the Institute, which is basically a Darwinian meat grinder designed to produce ruthless leaders.
Then in Golden Sun, we saw the escalation. The elite competition, gold versus gold, spiraled completely out of control.
It stopped being a healthy rivalry that kept the rulers sharp and turned into a full-scale civil war.
Which brings us to Morningstar. This is the phase of structural fracture. The incentive architecture of the society fails completely.
The elite competition creates a vacuum, and into that vacuum steps a multicolored coalition insurgency called the Rising.
And this is where the systems analysis gets fascinating, because we aren't just watching a war, we're watching a paradigm shift.
So let us unpack the design of this hierarchy, because it is not just brute force. You don't hold a solar system together for 700 years just by shooting people.
No, you need a theoretical foundation.
Right, there's a mythology keeping it all glued together.
And it is best articulated by the arch-governor character in the earlier books, but the consequences ripple heavily through Morningstar. He uses the analogy of the flea in the jar.
I love this analogy because it is just so bleak.
It is highly effective, though. The idea is simple. If you put fleas in a jar and screw the lid on, they will jump and hit the lid over and over again.
Until they learn.
Exactly. Eventually, they learn the height of the lid. They condition themselves to jump just below it. If you then remove the lid, the fleas still will not jump out.
They've internalized the ceiling.
That is the glass jar. The physical barrier is gone, but the psychological barrier remains.
And that is the noble lie of the society right there, that the ceiling is necessary.
They tell the Reds that they are pioneers sacrificing themselves to terraform Mars for a future generation. But the terraforming was finished centuries ago.
The Reds are literally slaves in a paradise they aren't allowed to see.
But here's the nuance that I think gets missed in a lot of surface-level readings. The golds are in the jar, too.
Oh, absolutely. That is a critical point.
The golds tell themselves a lie to justify their tyranny. They believe that their rule is the only thing saving humanity from extinction.
They look back at Earth, what they call democracy, and they just see chaos.
They see nuclear proliferation, resource wars, the near death of the species.
So in their minds, they aren't villains. They are shepherds. They are the iron goal that holds the wolves at bay.
Order is paramount to survival. That is their axiom. But by Morningstar, we see the crisis of that logic. We see the crisis of stagnation.
Which brings us to Quicksilver.
Yes, Regulus Egg Sun. He is a silver, the richest man in the society, and arguably the smartest operator in the room. And his critique of gold is just devastating.
He calls them vampire kings.
He does. And he is not talking about drinking blood. He's talking about sucking the life out of human progress.
Quicksilver points out that the society has frozen humanity in time.
They have the technology to use robots for mining. They have the capacity for massive automation. They do not actually need red slaves to mine helium-3.
So the slavery isn't even economically necessary at this point.
No, it is socially necessary for the golds. They keep the slavery to maintain the hierarchy.
Because if you replace reds with robots, you lose the base of your pyramid.
You lose the justification for your own superiority. Quicksilver notes that gold forbids innovation to maintain control.
They rely on the musings of Bronze Age pedophiles, referring to their obsession with Roman and Greek mythology to justify a spacefaring civilization.
That is the economic friction. They're choosing to be less productive just to stay in charge. It eventually causes the engine to seize.
And then we have to talk about the physical aspect of this glass jar, because it isn't just psychological. There is the literal biological carving.
Yes, the work done by Mickey the Carver. The protagonist, Darrow, was born a red. But to infiltrate the society, he is surgically, genetically, and biologically carved into a gold.
And the description of that process is not just body horror, it is a systems map.
We see the sheer physical gap. A red is bred for toil sickness, a short life. Their bone density is low. Their hearts are weak.
But a gold is sculpted for perfection. Their bones are like granite. Their reaction times defy physics. Their sensory processing is off the chart.
It creates a literal physics problem for revolution.
Right, because in the French Revolution, a peasant with a pitchfork could kill a noble if he got lucky.
But in this world, a single goalist, a peerless Scard, can slaughter 100 reds in a hallway without breaking a sweat.
The design intent was to make revolution a physical impossibility. The glass jar wasn't just a lie. It was a biological gravity well. The low colors simply cannot compete.
So we have this rigid, stagnant, terrifyingly powerful system. But in Morningstar, it starts to fracture, and we need to look at why.
It is not just because Darrow is a good fighter. It is because the incentives stop working.
This is the core of the collapse. Previously, the system rewarded dominance. It rewarded survival of the fittest.
That is what the Institute taught them.
And the Board of Quality Control maintained equilibrium through fear and culling. If a house got too powerful, they were pruned. If a low-color rebellion started, it was crushed.
But in Morningstar, the Sovereign and the Jackal, the elites trying to maintain control, they take that logic and dial it up to 11.
They attempt to consolidate control through hyper-brutality.
We see the use of nuclear weapons on Luna. We see the purging of their own inner circles, the destruction of the docks.
They are trying to squeeze the system tighter, but the more they squeeze, the more it slips.
There was this great line, "Power is the crown that eats the head."
That perfectly encapsulates the failure point. When you rely solely on dominance, you create an environment where no one is safe, not even your closest allies.
Look at the character Pliny. He is a politico, a schemer. In the old system, his betrayals were just business. He would have been rewarded.
But in a collapsing system where paranoia is the ruling emotion, his liability becomes fatal because nobody trusts him.
And this is where the insurgents, where Darrow flips the script. He realizes that when the structure is fracturing, trust becomes the most valuable currency.
It is an amazing shift. Because trust sounds soft. It sounds like a Hallmark card.
But it is actually a hard strategic asset.
It is a massive strategic efficiency. Think about transaction costs in a system.
Right.
The Sovereign is paranoid. She has to watch her back against her own guards. She has to spy on her own admirals.
That takes a ton of energy. That takes resources away from the actual war.
Exactly. Darrow, on the other hand, builds a Circle Severa Victra Mustang based on genuine trust.
There is that moment with Severo and Victra where they are literally willing to die for each other. And Darrow realizes that power isn't resolute, it shifts. But trust, creates a stable coalition.
From a systems perspective, trust lowers the friction of command. If
Yep.
I trust you, I don't need to spend resources monitoring you.
You don't need a board of quality control for your own friends.
The rising becomes more efficient than the society because it can coordinate without fear of internal purging. Coalition building replaces aristocratic rivalry.
That coordination allows them to build a massive cross-caste legitimacy. And this is where the map of actors gets really messy.
On one side, you have the sovereign representing status quo maintenance. Her tool is order, and her physical manifestation of this is the bunker on Luna.
That bunker is a nightmare. It is described as a nervous system. You have blues and greens hardwired into the walls with data streaming right through their brains.
It is the ultimate centralization of power. It represents the system's desperate attempt to see everything and control everything.
But on the other side, you have the rising, which is decentralized. It is a coalition of disparate groups.
You have red labor, obsidian muscle, silver capital, and disenfranchised golds.
Let us talk about the obsidian piece of that coalition, because that is a crisis in perception all on its own.
It is the most literal example of the theme in the book. The Obsidians, the warrior caste, were kept in a state of artificial primitivism.
They were trained to worship golds as Norse gods.
They believe in Valhalla. They believe the floating cities and the razor weapons are actual magic.
And the Rising disrupts this by simply showing them the truth. There's that incredible scene where Sifi, the Obsidian leader, rips the gravity boot off a gold.
It is a shattering moment. Imagine your entire worldview is based on the divinity of your masters, and then you see the wires.
You see the battery pack? Sifi exposes the technology behind the magic.
It is deicide. She kills the god to free the mind. And the result is chaos. This is the crisis for them.
When an Obsidian realizes that God is just a genetically modified human with a gravity boot, the entire legitimacy of their servitude evaporates.
It is not a rebellion against divinity anymore. It is a rebellion against a lie.
But freeing their minds is only half the battle. You also have to break the bank. This was a fascinating part of the strategy, the economic warfare.
This is where Quicksilver earns his keep. His plan is brutal. He doesn't just want to kill the sovereign, he wants to crash the economy.
They talk about deliberately inducing stagflation.
Yes, devaluation of stock assets, freezing commercial lending. Darrow and Quicksilver discuss this explicitly as a tactic.
They plant explosives in the refineries and the shipping docks. But, and this is key, they don't always blow them up.
Because the threat creates uncertainty, and markets absolutely hate uncertainty.
If a helium-3 shipment might explode, insurance premiums skyrocket, shipping halts, the flow of energy stops.
It is systems disruption 101. If you stop the flow of resources, the social order breaks down. You force the high colors to feel the pinch.
You render the old system inoperable.
Revolution is not just battles. It is the deliberate induction of social breakdown. You have to make the current system so painful that people look for an alternative.
You have to break the order that the sovereign uses as her primary justification for ruling.
Which brings us to the alternative. The leader, Darrow.
Darrow's leadership arc reflects this structural transformation perfectly. He starts the trilogy as a terrorist, essentially.
He is the Red God. He is the Reaper. His drive is pure revenge for his wife. He just wants to see gold burn.
But breaking a system is very different from building one.
And we see this tension come to a head with the dockyard dilemma.
Oh, this is such a pivotal moment. Let's set the scene for the listener. The sovereign ships are retreating to the Ganymede docks.
These docks are massive. They are the economic hub of the Moonlords.
Darrow has a choice. He can destroy the docks and trap the enemy fleet, which guarantees military victory. Or he can spare the docks and risk a prolonged war.
Tactically destroying the docks is the right move. It cripples the enemy fleet. It ends the immediate military threat. Darrow the Reaper wants to pull the trigger.
But strategically?
Strategically, it is a disaster. Those docks are the infrastructure of the future. By destroying them, he creates a wound that will last for generations.
He alienates potential allies. He proves the sovereign right that the Rising is just chaos and destruction.
It is the conflict between Darrow the Sword and Mustang the Bridge. Mustang is the character who represents Reconstruction. She is asking what comes after the war.
And Darrow realizes this. He realizes that a gold cannot lead the rebellion alone, but a red cannot rule the society because they lack the institutional knowledge.
It requires a hybrid legitimacy. He needs Mustang. He needs the mix of high and low.
But the cost of that leadership within a collapsing system is immense. Dare spends months in a box, literally in solitary confinement at the hands of the jackal.
He loses friends. He carries the weight of millions of deaths. It really de-romanticizes the great man myth of history.
We often think of revolutionary leaders as these glorious figures on statues, but Morning Star shows us the grime.
Leadership in a collapsing system isn't glorious. It is a constant series of impossible choices where every option involves suffering.
And even when they start winning, the structure fights back. This is what we call structural persistence.
Yes. Hierarchy has a way of reasserting itself even within the rebellion. Look at how they fight. They use iron reins.
For listeners who haven't read the books, describe an iron rein, because it is visually and conceptually terrifying.
An iron rein is an airborne assault. You are dropped from orbit in a star shell, basically a heavily armored mech suit.
You fall through the atmosphere, burning up with flak exploding around you.
It is a sensory overload of velocity and violence. It is the ultimate expression of gold dominance.
And the Rising uses them. They use the Master's tools to dismantle the Master's house.
They have to in order to survive. But there is a massive risk there. If you use the tools of oppression to liberate, do you just become the new oppressor?
The logic of the Iron Rein is might makes right. Can you build a functioning democracy on a foundation of orbital assault?
That is the central anxiety of the book's conclusion. Revolution risks reproducing the exact same dominance logic if new institutions are not engineered carefully.
And then there is the barbarian factor. The Golds are terrified of the Obsidians. We see Kavak's and Daxo Mustang's family, who are moderate Golds, genuinely worried about letting the Horde loose on civilization.
And honestly, they aren't entirely wrong to be worried, not because Obsidians are inherently evil, but because structurally integrating a warrior caste is incredibly difficult.
You have a group that has been kept in a state of artificial primitivism, and suddenly you are trying to integrate them into a high-tech civilian population.
It is a massive integration challenge. You have people who communicate primarily through violence suddenly walking the streets of a modern city.
The coalition is fragile. It is held together by a common enemy, the Sovereign.
But once the Sovereign is gone, what holds the red miner, the silver capitalist, and the obsidian warrior together, they have completely different values and needs.
And we see that fragility right up until the end, the Senate coup.
This scene is cinematic, but the structural analysis of it is what matters here. Let us walk through it.
The war is at its peak. Mustang walks into the Senate on Luna. The Senate is the heart of gold political legitimacy.
She walks in and she has two things. In one hand, she has the Sovereign's severed head.
Which is, well, it is a statement.
It is the ultimate, undeniable proof of the old regime's death. But in the other hand, she has the scepter.
A symbol of authority.
Bend or break. That is the offer. But notice what she is doing. She isn't just saying, we conquered you.
She is using the symbols of their own authority, the scepter, to validate the new order. She is offering them a bridge.
And the senators, these are proud, arrogant Golds. Do they fight to the death? Do they convert to democracy because they suddenly love liberty?
No. The text is very clear on this. They flock to the new power out of the simple human directive to survive.
They attach themselves to the rising star. It is institutional realism at its finest.
When a regime falls to earning, the bureaucrats don't just vanish. They look for safety.
Mustang offers them safety in exchange for compliance. It is not an ideological victory. It is an institutional realignment. The old power is dead. Long live the new power.
It reminds us that most people within a system aren't heroes or villains. They are just trying to not get executed when the management changes.
Precisely. Which leads us to the overarching theme of this deep dive, the crisis in perception.
So let us drill down on this. What is the crisis in this case? What is being misperceived by the characters and the readers?
The characters perceive the conflict as good versus evil. The Rising is good, the society is evil. Darrow is the hero, the Jackal is the villain.
But the system's reality is that it is order versus chaos,
Yeah.
and stagnation versus evolution.
The Sovereign truly believes she is the savior of the species. She perceives the Rising not as freedom fighters, but as agents of extinction.
She looks at Darrow and sees the return of the chaos that destroyed Earth.
And the Rising sees the peace of the society as a literal prison.
But the obscured structural layer is that this collapse wasn't just a war of ideas or heroics. It was driven by material factors.
Like the economic obsolescence Quicksilver pointed out, the system was rotting from the inside out.
It was a breakdown of the information monopoly when the truth about the carving came out. It was the fracturing of the elite monopoly on violence.
We tend to focus on the heroes. We focus on Darrow the Reaper. But a systems-level analysis reframes our visibility.
It shows us that focusing on heroic revolution oversimplifies the collapse. Darrow was the catalyst, but the fuel for the collapse was already there.
Darrow was the rock thrown at the glass, but the pressure inside the jar had been building for centuries.
The glass jar analogy holds up to the very end.
The crisis is the moment the population, both high and low, realized the ceiling was artificial, that the limits on their potential were engineered, not natural.
And once you see the glass, you cannot unsee it. Systems-level analysis moves the focus from who is sitting on the throne to what holds the throne up.
And that is why Reconstruction is so uniquely hard. You have shattered the container that held society together. Now you have to build something that holds people together without crushing them.
And that is a much harder task than winning an Iron Reign. The transition from regime overthrow to governance is brutal.
The book ends with a military victory, but the systems analyst knows the real work is just beginning.
So if we step back and reconnect this fictional collapse to broader real-world dynamics, what do we see?
We see the fragility of newly formed institutions. We see how post-regime instability requires massive coalition politics to survive.
When the world breaks, you cannot force people to follow you forever. You have to give them a reason to trust you. Reputation and mercy become actual strategic tools.
And we are reminded that systems shape belief. The Golds believed they were superior because the system was designed to make them look superior.
The Reds believed they were weak because the system was biologically designed to keep them weak.
Better tools, like the truth, like economic leverage, help us see clearly.
It is a fascinating look at how a world breaks and tries to heal. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Go for it.
Think about the institutions you interact with every day. The companies, the governments, the social structures. Are you focusing too much on the personalities sitting on the thrones? Or are you looking at the incentive architectures holding those thrones up? Because when a system starts to fracture, it is the underlying architecture that dictates how it falls.
That is exactly the kind of structural clarity we need. Not urgency, not quick solutions, just clear visibility.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.